I may be the Queen, but I am calling this what it is. It's a royal shit show.
I've just about had enough of Andrea, David, and especially Joe, but I must admit that I quite like Richard. But still, it's a shit show, and it's time to just stop.
What would happen if everyone listened to Andrea, David, Richard, and Joe? What could happen if everyone listened to the shit show?
There's some things which are really dangerous. In fact, I lost my voice after all the screaming I was doing when I heard what they were saying on the shit show. They're the real threat we're facing.
I'd just like to say that I have never, ever tuned in. And I can guarantee that I won't be watching the shit show with Andrea, David, Richard, and Joe. But maybe I could write a song about David's book.
These guys can make a small, insignificant problem like an oil field on fire sound like it's a real shit show. They just exaggerate everything. They're fake news. And they're whiny. They're the real shit show.
Oh, I absolutely agree. It's a shit show. The important thing is that we approach it with joy, because then it's an uplifting shit show.
I remember the first time I heard the shit show. At least I think I remember. What are we talking about?
How do you do it?
Yeah, nice work, Joe. The beauty of AI. All right, welcome to the shit show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name's David Coe, although the intro made me sound like Statler or Wardorf. I'm not sure which one.
I'm probably the other one, but I'm normally Richard Bussolato, and I'm normally at the bottom left, just like this week, back in London.
And my name is Joe Augustine. Welcome once again to the Shit Show. It's the only program on the internet that we know about that likes to look directly into the dumpster fire of global civilization and say, you know what, let's talk about it. We're living through what academics are now calling a polycrisis, which is a really fancy, very expensive word for everything's on fire simultaneously all the time and nobody has a hose. We've got a war in the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz is basically a parking lot, and Wall Street has had its worst week in 4 years. But, well, at least we're all in this together, right? Right?
Yeah.
Some more than others.
Yeah, and we have a special guest today, and we're not going to introduce him first because I wanted to just get a sense from the three of you. How did the news impact you this week? Because this is a different kind of intensity this week compared to previous weeks. Anyone want to sort of share their feelings?
I've somewhat kept away from the news along because I think the it's this pause, right? So what's happened is that the US needs to get more troops there, it needs to get more weapons there, and so on. So it's kind of said, oh, we're not going to do anything. We've been great, and are we talking? We're not talking. Are we talking? We're not talking, and all of that's going on. So I've been kind of allowing just all of that to go past, and I think it's kind of useful and important in some ways. I'm not sure whether it's the lull before the storm or whether, this is actually a moment of transition in that way. If people were rational actors, then you might think it's a lull before the storm. If you think the economy, global economy, and those sort of things are what's on actually people's minds, as in the people who are going to make the decisions to bomb or not, then you think it might be that. But I'm not so sure, so I'm just kind of pausing, allowing that to flow a bit.
That's a good idea. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, we fast forward a week. It's kind of been more of the same with a slight tilt towards the rhetoric being ramped up, but probably the action on the ground being pared down a little bit, mostly because, and I keep saying this, modern militaries are not equipped to fight long wars. You just don't have the munition stockpile to keep going at the rate you would like to, because we don't have those supplies. And even a country the size and power of the US will be running out, particularly when you keep on hitting, 30 grand drones with 2 million missiles. It's a pretty poor economic equation. So the rhetoric has been ramped up, and we don't obviously know what's going on, if there are any negotiations or whether this is just a smoke screen for the next more explosive phase. But yeah, it's changed its tack. And like Joe said, it was a pretty poor week for stocks. We had some reprieve overnight. Asia opened very weak and kind of recovered through the night. And it looks like Europe, US will be opening higher, but it's not pretty. And now, starting next week, we will start to see the first real economic data in the West where the conflict is actually part of what we're measuring. And I don't think it will be pretty.
All right, Joe, can we move from our heads down to our hearts?
Well, I was going to say I wish I could be more cerebral about my approach to things, but I actually tend to get all my news from comedy. I tune into the different shows and listen to the monologues, and I get my updates from there. And occasionally, someone who's funny and smart says something, and I'm listening as well. So I was listening to Jon Stewart this week. He has a weekly podcast, and his guest was one of the two, not Rory, but the other one from The Rest is Politics. It was a good chat, and for me, that's kind of a way of catching up with things. The thing about the news for me is that it's first of all, it's no longer this search for facts. You're just hearing the different versions of stories, right? I mean, especially with all the talks about negotiations. You hear Tehran using the phrase fake news. You go like, okay, something's happening now. So yeah, for me, it's just trying to unravel this, and this is what the show is about. You try to figure out as much of it as possible, trying to figure out where things might be going, and then trying to make a bit of a, I guess, to help. I'm hoping we're helping the audience figure out a little bit more about what really might be happening, and so they can attach the right level of panic or anxiety to the various things they find out about.
You'll have to send me through that video with so it's Alistair Campbell, right? The interview with Jon Stewart, so yeah, it's been an interesting week. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but everything seems to happen on a Saturday, which obviously is so it's basically once we finish the show, the shit show sort of ramps up again the next day, which obviously has a market implications. But it was after the show last week that the 48-hour warning went out, and I was trying to understand what would the impacts of that warning would be. And I actually had a pretty high level of anxiety by Monday because I was understanding how it would impact us, because a lot of the impacts from this war are really, really big out in Asia. And so, I had and the anxiety attack came from the realization that we as a family weren't ready, but also the bigger story of the impact in Asia. And you're hearing some of the stories that are coming out of Asia already. It's horrible. We'll talk about them later. So Steve went out and looked into the web for Singapore. So that's one of the first things that was at risk of going down, is basically the entire web infrastructure across Asia comes through the Straits of the other one, the red, whatever it's called. Anyway, it turns out at the end of last year, Singapore launched its brand new cable directly from America to Singapore. So it actually was safe, because digital banking would go down, which means shopping, you wouldn't be able to shop, which means all of that sort of stuff. So I had a bit of an anxiety attack, and then I'm not an anxious person, so that I found that I always find it a bit. The last time I remember having that was when Russia invaded Ukraine. At the same time, the next IPCC report, and at the same time there was record highs in the Antarctic and Antarctica. So those three things happened at the same time. That was the last time I felt that, feeling. So, and then what you were just saying, Joe, like the trying to understand what is going on. So it was Alistair Campbell who basically said on his podcast, The Rest is Politics, they don't know what's going on. And so I kind of went, all right, so if I can't work it out, that's not a sign of anything. It's because the people who are really paying attention and have all the contacts and behind the scenes, including in the Middle East, including in Iran, they can't work it out. But one thing I would encourage you to do is check out Iran's meme and Lego video activity. Have you guys seen it?
Yeah, I've seen a clip of it. Yeah.
And I was also wondering if this is a good time for the taco stuff to come out, because I think any way of attacking a narcissist in the middle of a situation like this might not be the wisest thing we can do, because we need stable heads, right? But anyway, so it was, I felt it this week. But anyway, Joe. Who's going to help us sort our heads out?
Well, as we do this show, we already have 4 minds with very different perspectives on things, and we try to bring on additional people as well to give us more perspective. So our guest this week is an award-winning global speaker, HRD Corp registered trainer, best-selling author, as well as transformational master coach and facilitator. He's widely recognized as the world's #1 thought leader on executive loneliness, ranked as the top 28 coach worldwide by Global Guru's top 30. He's a certified master coach and a professional certified coach by PCC, and specializing in executive life, team, and interestingly, sober coaching. He is also certified and highly experienced as a facilitator, as well as a supervised counselor and psychotherapist. And he's basically everything that my mom wanted me to be, but I just couldn't do it. Can you please welcome Nick Johnson to the stage?
Welcome,
you so
Nick.
much, Joe.
Yeah, and that's not even everything, right?
Yeah, that was the good side of me, and then we can talk about the dark side moving forward here, right?
No, but when I was putting your qualifications together for the show, there were things I had to leave out because there were just too many. So you're a qualified man.
Well, thank you for that, Andrea. And I think, what you mentioned there, what perhaps is a bit unique is the sobriety coaching, the therapy and the counseling. And where that comes from is obviously having working with leaders. As a coach, I had deep conversations, but I fell short because when you start to have conversations, you're getting some trust. Before you know it, you will touch on stuff that perhaps, we are not qualified to discuss as a coach, such as burnout, addictions, suicidal thoughts, and all the rest of it. It's just around the corner.
Okay, so now I understand it a bit more, because I thought it was sober coaching versus the other kind of coaching you could do.
Nice. All right, so I'm going to put you in the spotlight in a minute, Nick, but we might as well get started because I know you've got other things to do. So one of the reasons I wanted to do the introduction the way we did it was just to give you a sense of where we are. And so David and Richard stayed in their head. Joe talked about one of the ways that he copes, which I thought was really insightful. And of course, I was speaking much more from the heart about how it had impacted me. So I thought it might give you some context that you can use when we go through the questions, because we are all actively paying attention to what's going on in the world. We look it in the eye. Some of us more than others, and in different ways. And so for someone like me, it's been a really, really hard week. So for people who aren't paying attention, I can imagine that what's going on is really, really creating a lot of despair on top of all the other layers of despair that exist. So no one can see where it's going to take us. All of the experts, none of them can tell what's going to come up next. So before we kick off, give us a little bit more of your story, why you do what you do, your motivations, so that people can have got some context when we go through the questions.
Yeah, so I spent a decade climbing the corporate ladder, or maybe rightly so to say, elbow my way to the top of the corporate ladder. And once I was there, I was basically lonely, isolated. I started to question, why have I spent, first of all, almost a decade at university to get this level, and then to work so hard to get it, because I felt lonely at the top. And with that, basically, I got a lot of self-doubt in myself, and I didn't really know what to do. But I resigned from that dream job. Once I came home and got challenged by my ex-wife, I filed for a divorce. I wasn't ready to have that conversation either. And then I just isolated myself. So for about 2-3 years, I was in a dark hole myself. My bad habits turned over to addictions. So my bad habits would be like go to the bar and having perhaps too many drinks to relax after work. While that was a bad habit, now in my life in turmoil, it turned over to addiction. From there, though, I hit my eventually rock bottom, and I crawled out of those ashes and rebuilt my life over the last decade, and now helping others who might be struggling, also going through that. So that is perhaps the best way to describe what I'm doing these days.
Yeah, and I've heard you present it at events, and it's very powerful the way you talk about it, and courageous. All right, so one of your focus areas is high performers. So you help them through uncertain times. So how can we apply it more broadly to everyone? What can be applied to all based on what you've learned with the leaders you work with?
Yeah, what can be applied is certainly that we all find different coping mechanisms. With senior leaders, perhaps it's often drugs, it's alcohol, and so on, but we all fall for something. The younger generation might turn to social media. Professional women might turn to shopping too much online or Lazada. Many of the men I'm working with also, for example, chefs, kitchen staff, restaurant managers, and so on, they might fall into a gambling habit, online gambling, and so on. So it seems like we all find our sort of escapes. And it is when they turn into bad habits, when they then eventually turn into an addiction, when they run out of control. So in my work, then I'm trying to have honest conversations about this, to just get the awareness. Where am I in my life? And are there some things that is wasting my time, wasting my money? And is it something that is ruining my relationships in my life? So those are the kind of conversations that I think is valid for everyone to ask themselves. Is it something that is not serving me well here?
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of people would be doing, and I'm sure this is even more so for men, but I can relate to it as a woman too. It's the pretending to be strong. What's the cost of that?
Yeah, and that's something that I grew up with. I grew up in a working class family in Sweden. To top it up, I was born on May Day, which is sort of Labor Day in Sweden. And, my father was a construction worker. My mother was working in a shop. And basically, I was told to get a job. And the way to earn money and success was work harder, work longer, raise your hand to work the weekends if you want to earn more money. That was the world as I saw it. And I think many of us have grown up, perhaps if we have parents also like me who are baby boomers, who had that mindset that it is hard work. And I remember, boys don't cry and all these kind of sayings from the past, not discussing feelings, just grinding through and pushing through. And that's the mindset that I brought with me also in the professional world later on. I basically worked harder, worked longer, and that's not very good when you're in a senior leadership role in Jakarta, when you have to travel 2-3 hours each way in the car. And if you then are working 12 hours, then it's not much left for sleep and recovery and take care of yourself. So that was the downward for my fall, and that's what I see in many others as well.
Yeah. So, that's an interesting perspective, because there's a lot of, the whole manosphere thing, which we were talking about last week. It's like there's this swing back to that way of thinking, the suffering, you've got to be strong. Are you seeing that coming up, or is the move to men in particular expressing themselves and their feelings and their sufferings, is that an unstoppable force? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I see that swing. I think we had, a bit of a decade when the workforce and the corporate culture was at the core. We spoke about life purpose and psychological safety, and that's the work that I do now. But I see that swing coming back because companies cannot live up to it. You cannot say that treat your family, your staff as family, and then you terminate them. So we're past that. There's no trust in the corporate world anymore. That is destroyed, and therefore, we are keeping more secrets. We are not so vulnerable. We don't dare to tell HR or my boss what's going on, because maybe that will be held against me when the next round of layoffs. We're looking at that list and see, where am I on this list when there's a layoff? And if we know that we are in the hot zone for that, we better keep to ourselves. We better just work really hard, hitting the targets, protecting ourselves, because it's our security at stake. And I think that's a human defense mechanism. So it's not a surprise that sadly that's the way that we have gone.
Yeah, but it sounds like something we need to be very much aware of so we can protect ourselves. Because what are the implications of going back the other way?
Well, the implications are, of course, that people will be more into backstabbing and looking after themselves. They will also mean that people will cover up for mistakes. If we have a psychological safety in the workforce, we are not so scared to mention, I made a mistake and this is what I can learn from it. But if you're scared for your own job, you might not take that chance to speak up because you're worried that it will be turned against you. So we will see more closeness and so on. And therefore, what we need to do is, of course, having more of these healthy conversations and bring it to the forefront and to address it.
If you guys want to jump in, just jump in. So one of the things that we talk about a lot as far as dealing with the future is building community and really getting close to home rather than, but it can also be online community. So you're part of many communities, you build communities. So for all of those people, and it's not just men, but for all of those people who are coping alone, how can you build deeper connections?
Yeah, so we got to think about safe spaces. And I'm always talking about a few different safe spaces at home, safe spaces in our community, and safe spaces at work. And especially for us men, we are hopeless at this. I don't like to generalize, but women tend to be a little bit more vulnerable, have a few close friends they talk to. Perhaps at home they have a sister or a friend or maybe a mother or someone at least they will talk to when things are not right. At work, maybe they have a friend or two who they will have a lunch break or go for a coffee and share if something is not right. Outside of work, the women maybe have a friend or two who they will go over and see for coffee and share if something is not right. The men, though, we are not as good as that. We might go out for a game of golf with our friend or go to the bar, have a few drinks and watch a game of sport to forget about the trouble that is happening. We are not so open to share it because we don't want to bother or we don't want to be judged. I'm generalizing here, but that's a clear picture that I seen when I interviewed for my book here, Executive Loneliness, as I wrote that, and I included it as part of the chapters of men versus women. And that's the picture that is painted. And that was also my case. I had fantastic friends when I went through my challenges, and I loved to go and watch sport and drink beer with them. That was my way of coping and dealing and going through a crisis. It wasn't to seek help or speak up about my challenges.
So how can you do it? How can you build it? Just be, because I don't think it is just men, but as you researched that it's predominantly men. So how can they do it? Because it's something I encourage my husband to do as well, right?
Yeah, so these days I do it completely differently, and it is by having then safe spaces everywhere. So I belong to associations and organizations and communities where I feel attached. I belong to running clubs, cycling clubs, swim academies, triathlon clubs. That means I train with them. This morning I was in a swim academy with one bunch of people. I go on trips together. We do things, activities. Those are the sports that I love. But I also run a men's group. And we have a WhatsApp group where the men check in daily to share the gratitude list. What are they grateful for today? So you practice the vulnerability on a day-to-day basis, and you see the good things in your life and in the world. And so that shifts the mindset. If you do that in the morning, you set yourself up for a beautiful and positive day. I've done it now for 2.5 years, and it has a very good impact on my life. And then throughout the day to see 35 men from all over the world, a list coming in throughout the day, and that's pinged on top of my WhatsApp group. So that's the things I see. We also have calls. Last night we had a call for 1 hour on Zoom where we shared about betrayal, and people could share what were the people in their life who betrayed them, how did they overcome that, and what's the strength and the positive thing that they can take about that. So we turn every conversation into what was the learning, what's the strength, and how do we deal with it better moving forward. So by doing that, again, we practice being vulnerable and we practice being positive about it. So we're not bottling up. So that's just a few examples of things. And of course, we have also EGN, which now my wife Donna run, which is a peer network. And when you talk networking, you think people will come in and present and show how good they are. But in EGN, the formula is flipped around. You come in and present, this is my number one work-related challenge right now. And then you help each other to solve that. So it's about practicing vulnerability in a safe space.
All right, I'm gonna see what you guys. I love the WhatsApp group. Who's got something to jump in with? Joe?
Well, the challenge for me is, I think, it's always different seasons that we are in, right? The different seasons in terms of how the Office games played. And I didn't like playing the old Office game. I don't like playing the new Office game. I don't like playing the game in the Office. I mean, you've got to fit the culture, and culture is evolving. It's changing. The expectations are changing. And I think what happens is, when you especially when we talk about things like safe spaces, we mentioned it last week actually. There is an evolution of what then belongs in the safe space. So you declare a safe space, but you can't say that. So that's I think that's the challenge that comes along with this. And right now, the anxiety, if you like, it comes from also trying to figure out now where the boundaries are. If I'm being open, if I'm being vulnerable, where does the line for that go? We talk about our mistakes. I think we probably have a scale, and you go like everything up to 3 I can share. The big screw up, I'm gonna go like nothing else to say. I'm good.
Yeah. I think that's a really common feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's also this kind of, it's almost like when because we live, I work a lot with speakers, right? And I don't know whether I'm projecting, but I get the sense that everyone is trying to figure out what's the sad thing they can share. It's like, we talk about the one-upmanship of having a bigger car, bigger home, whatever it is. Now there's a shift towards like, oh, my tragedy is this way, and then they try to. It's the. I think a long time ago I heard this thing about what conversation usually is about, is people just waiting to speak, right? And now it's like, in order to have that valid sort of thing to bring to it, you have to bring your sacrificial lamb. So I hear people trying to tell anecdotes, stories about things and difficult things, and I think it's just the way we are as human beings. We're always trying to belong. We're always trying to have a status in the group that we belong in. And now the currency has changed. The currency is attention, and it's given now on a more emotional basis. And I feel quite put out, because I'm inherently someone who likes to work on very logical ideas. And many times I'm asked, so what do you feel about this? And I go like, I don't think I really feel about this, but I know I think about this. I know I feel a bit upset about this, but I have the whole reason for feeling upset. But I keep getting pushed back to, it's about how do you feel? Like, well, can we just say I'm pissed off, but here are the reasons why?
All right, Nick, what do you reckon? Because it's a big part of the challenge, right?
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, Joe, is of course people are a bit vulnerable in sharing that story, and it's not to take it to their advantage. But I like the formula that is given by the 12-step programs with everything you share, and that's the formula we have for our men's group and so on as well. It's experience, strength, and hope. So experience is what has happened in the past, the challenge we went through, the rock bottom we had or whatever, and we focus sort of 10% on that. And then it's the strength, when we find what was the turning point in this, what was it that changed it, what got out of me there, that's another sort of 10%. And then 80% is the strength. It's what I'm doing now, what's the future, and the hope, right? We want people to experience our learning and what we're doing through it, and how it changed our life. So we got to keep that in picture. No one want to listen to someone standing there. 80% of the talk or conversation is all about the shit they ended up. No one really cares. Yes, we need to understand where we came from, and that's why I share. I was born in a working class family, and I worked as a painter for 5 years. That's why I kept that mindset when I was in the corporate world. And while it worked, I could climb all the way up, but against the wrong wall, and I fell all the way down, right? So we got to put it in full circle so people can understand why we share it, I think.
Yeah. All right. So one of the interesting parts of this time is that young people don't drink that much, although my children are not showing that same inclination. But unhealthy coping mechanisms, alcohol, overwork, social media, porn. There's so many of them now. So we're in a so unhealthy versus healthy support system. So I know you deal with a lot of, especially around addictions. How can we seek a better healthy support system or create one?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because indeed the younger generation drink less, but it doesn't mean that they are using safe spaces and speaking and using coaches and having the right resources to deal with the challenges. It means that they are shifting to perhaps other bad habits and other addictions, and such as online gaming, gambling, social media scrolling, so on. So they're still using unhealthy coping mechanism. That has not changed. And the way to deal with this is to take ownership, first having the awareness about it and then deal with it. And the beautiful thing is, these days there are 12-step recovery programs for everything. While I had an alcohol problem myself, and when I took ownership from that and I went in and I said, I have a problem with this, my urge to drink and the problems was lifted. It was almost 8 years ago now, and I hear many similar experiences from other people. It is as long as you are in denial about the problem, the issues there, and it works the same with social media and everything else. Now you have 12-step programs also for social media. You have for sex addiction, gambling, gaming. You have even now 12-step programs if you go personally bankrupt. You even have a 12-step program if you drive your company bankrupt, because just imagine yourself, you are a business owner and suddenly your business have gone bankrupt. You might not want to go home and tell your spouse, partner, that this has just happened because of the stigma and the shame. And that is where, sadly, many people are jumping off a building at that point. And now our society is full of these recovery programs. So no matter what challenge is there, have the awareness, surrender to it, and go into ChatGPT or Google and just call up and go to a meeting. These are all around the world, and there's meetings happening every hour in Singapore.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize it had gone so far. And I was kind of sort of thinking back to what Joe was saying. So there's the operating from a place of logic, but also the other side, and we've talked about this a little bit, is younger generations spend a lot of time talking about trauma, and like they've had the best lives, because we grew up in a different time where there was a lot more trauma that was never talked about. So it's really interesting. It's like I always say with feminism, it needed to swing to one extreme before it could swing back, before it sort of sat in the middle. And I feel like the pendulum in so many ways has been swinging wildly. But we were talking about the safe spaces. So within that context, like if you think about, like I would be comfortable in a room with a Joe having a conversation about something complicated because I like the way he speaks and thinks. But I know that a lot of women would find it very challenging to be in a room with Joe because they wouldn't feel that they could speak the way they want to speak, because he's brutal in his truth sometimes, but I like it, So, but how do we get that right? Seeking the right place, seeking the right safe environment. Feeling I think we need to speak up. Yeah,
I think we need to look at it in different ways, right? We need coaches and therapists and counselors in our life, but we also need mentors. And one good example is, for example, for mentors, that means that we have someone who is perhaps more senior, someone who walked the path before. So as a coach, I will have my mentors in different spaces. They're life coaching, sobriety coaching, executive coaching. I know the people who are 5-10 years ahead of me, and they are my mentors. I also have mentees, people below me in coaching space. In professional speaking, I will also have that. I will know who is my mentor when it comes to making the best contract, who would be the one who can help me with my TEDx to have the right pitch, and I will reach out to them to have the right conversation with the right person. And if I'm unsure, there will be speaking coaches, there will be coaches for the coaches, right? And I keep engulfing myself in those healthy conversations, and then being available also for the ones below. And I like to say one thing as well, Andrea. Yes, the generation now perhaps are talking a lot about trauma, and my path has been to study positive psychology and coaching, which is more forward thinking. We acknowledge that there's something there and we deal with it, but it's perhaps 10% of the journey. 90% is, well, now we accept that is there. How can we turn this into our strength? Just like I turned in my alcohol addiction into my golden nugget, because now I can support between 10 and 20% of all senior executives in Singapore has an alcohol addiction. That means I can be there to support them.
Could you want to talk through, because I heard you at Cindy's book launch talk about how you said, I've got a problem and I want to address it, and then how you went about sort of finding the answers to the problems, because you gave a couple of really good examples. I thought it was a really good structure. You happy to share that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the alcohol was the turning point in my life, because it was what let me down a lot. And once I had awareness of that, I surrendered that and I got the help for it. Everything else shifted for me. And then I asked myself, if this worked for alcohol, what about if I continue this search inside myself and really map out all the things and the challenges and the problems and the pains in my life and seek help for every point with the best expert by reading the books and coaches and so on, and turn them around. So what I did then, I worked with everything from relationship experts. I worked with a child psychologist down on Orchard Road to turn around the relationship with my son. Because when I got divorced, my son, who was 5-6 years of age at the time, he moved to Sweden with my ex-wife, and I was in Singapore. Then the pandemic hit and it was lockdown, so we couldn't even see each other for a few years. And I remember calling home, and being a phone dad didn't work with a 6-7-year-old. It just led to nowhere. And then I thought, well, this is a problem now. I'm sober. I sorted that out. How can I sort this out? And this child psychologist really helped me and worked with me and gave me the tools and to turn that relationship around. It was everything from how to have conversation with my ex-wife to, through her, understand my son better, to get intelligence, like getting a schedule of his subjects, understand the name of his friends, the name of his teachers, his hobbies, get all this with me so I could have better calls. It was also to step into his world, and I had questionnaires for my ex-wife to find out what's his hobbies, what game does he play on computer, and it was Minecraft. And the homework for me was to then learn to play Minecraft. So I installed multiplayer, and my son and I started to play weekly, and we kept up this for almost 3 years. For 3 hours every Saturday, I will block time, I will log on, I will do multiplayer. And through coming into his world, we built this strongest relationship. So that's how I tackled everything in my life, things that I couldn't sort out before, I now have really become good at. And this includes triathlon as well. You can see my medal on the wall here from the World Championship, which I could not even touch before I had this approach.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing that for the last 2 years of the 3 years you've been playing Minecraft, he's been doing it because you want to play it.
It was fun indeed, Joe.
Richard, David, do you want to jump in with anything? I like. Yeah, David. Yeah.
I had a conversation this week, and goes a little bit into spaces, but it's somewhat a little bit different context. Anyway, this is about, the conversation was about it was about kind of Hindu philosophy about buildings, basically, kind of the Vastu, and where the environment, the way the building faces and structures and so on in your home and things makes a difference to your life. It's very much like a feng shui in Chinese, in that way, that it matters. But the thing that it brought up was the way when they start learning about this is you think of it as 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So 1/3 is kind of your effort, 1/3 is luck, and 1/3 is actually that environment, structure of that environment. And I think and it made me kind of think about that importance of that structure of that environment. And the idea here is for us, when in that conversation, was what I would call as the spiritual energy of an environment that you're in. And if you are in the environment which is structured to have the right sort of spiritual energy, the flow of energy around it, then you're 1/3 up. It makes a big difference to having one which doesn't care about that. And I think the next comment about safe spaces kind of fit into that. Because if you have an environment where there are spaces where you can be in that way, then you already have that 1/3 up for you. And that allows you to do your effort to be riding on top of that. And luck also comes into it. You can have good luck, bad luck. But if you had bad luck without that sort of 1/3, then that bad luck may be 1/2 of what happens. So you're struggling against it, because even if you make all your best effort, bad luck takes it away in that way. And I think that's actually quite a useful way of actually thinking about how we want to go about preventing the need to end up in the 12-step programs for the recovery. Those are important to be able to come out and actually manage ourselves. But if we're really talking about a conversation, actually wanting to help people forward, is quite important to make sure that we actually have that sort of understanding of the role of the environment itself. And this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is a good way of thinking about it. It doesn't make everything, but it makes that difference that allows your efforts to be much more effective.
So what was the 1/3 split? What was it again?
1/3 is that environment. So if you think, we're talking about buildings, so if you're Chinese, you understand feng shui, and you would understand about, getting that right effectively gets you 1/3 up. 1/3 is your own effort. You still got to get out of bed. You still go and do all the things. You still got to go and kind of make all those efforts. And 1/3 is luck, because you know what?
Yeah,
that's just the way the cookie crumbled, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, don't think about the importance of that relevance. And I think people talk about safe spaces without recognizing the importance of what it actually offers in that way. It's not a refuge, because people think of safe spaces as a way to chicken out, kind of, we need to accommodate and all the rest of it. But actually, it is to have a space which is where the flow of energy, if you like, that flow of that kind of human energy and physical, spiritual energy is in your favor.
Yeah.
And that can be very simply, we end up talking about NEOM, the Saudi Arabian plant of this 170-kilometer long glass building. And the orientation of this building is east to west. So now imagine what this means, because you're going to wake up, the sun is on the east, it's going to go south. So half of this facing 170 kilometers, and it's going to go west, is going to have tremendous heat all day. There's no refuge from it. And the other half never sees the sun.
Wow.
So that's the basic orientation of an environment that makes sure there is no safe space.
Wow. It looks like it's practically not happening anyway.
Right, but just the idea, and I think, and what this actually philosophy, what this approach actually says is, when you start without considering that, your projects are much more likely to fail. Because people engage with it can't actually quite engage in there, and that's where that safe space and those sort of things. Another way of thinking about that is actually the space where people can engage, and that's where the environment matters. And that's a different perspective, because I think sometimes we end up coming out from it in desperation. So we say, I need my personal space, I need my safe space. When you flip it the other way around, it is actually, how do you actually create the environment and the space so that you're at one with that flow that you want?
Yeah, but okay. So I think where we're going here, and it'd be interesting to hear what you think, Nick. Right. So there's a lot of layers to what we've just been discussing, because safe space, from the way David explained it, like, you can imagine that for a very large percentage of the population, that's not something that they've got much control over. So it's a poverty issue in a lot of ways, but not always. But from the trauma obsession from the backlash to the language, so I've got 18, 19-year-old sons, and they get frustrated by their generation and the way they speak and a lot of the things that are being said, but their whole generation is used to this conversation. It's older generation saying let's push back, the whole DEI woke backlash. So we've got a lot of different sort of challenges here in this mix. So there's no clear answer, right? And you sort of, from what Joe was saying, there's no clear answer. I mean, have you got any sort of epiphanies while we were all talking?
Yeah, so I like what you shared, David, with the 3 parts: the effort, the luck, and the environment. And in coaching, we have something called the Wheel of Life, and I put together myself a life assessment of that, which I ask all my coaching clients to rank themselves on a scale of 1 to 10 where they are when we start, because I want to measure the journey. And interestingly enough, one of those 8 is physical environment. So how satisfied are you in the country you live, the city you live, the house you live in, and how it is internally? So you're constantly then asking yourself, where am I with this and where do I want to go? So 1 to 10 is now, and 1 to 10 is the future state. And then the coaching journey is to take you there as much as you can. But it's not only the environment. We also look at finances. We look at health, family and friends, the quality of relationship, the quality of your marriage. And if someone has been married for 20, 30 years, that would naturally be something that perhaps we take for granted. We're not putting in any effort anymore. Most executives I work with will say, well, my marriage is a scale 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10. That would be the average score. Because we are not focusing on it. We do some other things. We focus on the business and career, finances, personal growth. So that is, I think, important conversations for everyone to have, no matter where we are, to question ourselves where we are in our life and getting that awareness, almost like an audit of ourselves. And that's where coaching comes in.
Mm-hmm. Can you do the Wheel of Life assessment on your website?
Yes, I have a complimentary assessment, and I'm happy to share the link with you, and you can share it with everyone if they want to do a complimentary assessment. It only takes 3-4 minutes, and they get the response.
Yeah, because knowing where you are, I've just put you're obviously on LinkedIn, but I've just put your website there on the screen, so hopefully people will see that. All right, vulnerability. So that's a word that's been used in abundance for many years now. Brene Brown obviously brought the whole vulnerability conversation to the fore. It's a strength. A lot of people struggle with it, but why would you say it's an important thing to be really considering now?
So can you repeat the question? Sorry, Andrea, I missed the part there.
No, that's okay. So vulnerability. Why is it so important, especially now while we're going through? So, I mean, people are going through personal crises as well as global crises. There's a lot going on. So why is vulnerability important?
Yeah, I think it's very important because if we're going through a challenging time, we shouldn't bottle it up. We need someone to talk to about it. And if you're zoning in on the news like you do, you need someone to talk to about it, not keeping it in, which I'm pleased to see and hear that you're all talking together. So for me, who's zooming out from it, I don't need a safe space for the poly crisis, as I'm not attuned to it, but I still need safe spaces about other things I'm going through in my life, and I find my tribes where I can have those relevant conversations. So I think in that sense, everyone need to find their tribe, or maybe even a pocket inside a tribe, which is people we click with, where we feel safe to have these conversations. And I think that's absolutely essential. And I just want to add one thing. As you mentioned the word vulnerability, I think it also it can be a negative thing if we come into the office and overshare something. We don't want to come in and blast all our personal crises and news in the face of everyone. That's not vulnerability. That is, I think, according to me, would be oversharing, which I wouldn't encourage anyone to do.
It's true. Here you go. I'm just going to put that's the link if you want to do Nick's life assessment. I think you sent it to me once, but I don't think I did it. Sorry. But to continue that conversation. So I join a lot of community webinars, events across all angles of the poly crisis. And the one thing, I think I've talked about it here on the show before, is people are so desperate to connect within those communities that they're actually more focused on connecting than the content that's being shared. To the point where it's obnoxious. Like I remember one event started off with like a meditation, and nobody was meditating. They were just all trying to get everyone's LinkedIn profile so they could connect, but they weren't doing it to be obnoxious. They were doing it because they were looking for like-minded people. So it's hard to find people in your own community that are willing to talk about the stuff we talk about. So you often find you have to censor yourself because it just makes people uncomfortable if you don't. And that's very difficult. So I don't know, you got any thoughts on that? But
yeah, I think very interesting point you mentioned, Andrea, and we see this also in the EGN network that Donna runs now in Singapore, that you have people coming for a topic for 4 hours, you divide them in breakout groups to discuss this topic, and you walk around to listen on the tables, only to hear that they're actually not talking about that. They're just so hungry and looking for connection that they want to talk about themselves, their life, and what they're doing. So I think there's perhaps a big need for people to find time just to speak, because if we look back in time 10-20 years ago, perhaps there was more white space in our calendars. We were not on these global calls, regional calls all the time, and we had time to go and meet people. But now people don't have that time, so they have no time to chit chat or talk to anyone. Therefore, perhaps we just in meetings with agenda, you give someone a chance to speak, they will speak. So I think in that sense, join communities, join churches or groups or charities, the Rotaries or whatever, where we can do a meaningful impact and have conversations, because we need to speak.
I think it's great advice. Anyone got any more questions before I ask the finale? Because Nick needs to leave us. Anyone?
Yeah, I need to chip in, as a fellow Swede, or at least in my case, half Swede. I very much share your upbringing, I think, albeit a few years before you. And Sweden is a very particular society in many ways, and I would describe it as highly, in my age group, Lutheran. You work hard, you get your reward. That's very much the mindset. Nothing's going to come for free to you unless you make the effort effectively. What I have found, and this is just me, and I'm curious to see if your job finds the same thing, is that I take tremendous comfort in aging. Or maturing, which is probably a better word. And I am, thousands of % better at coping with these things now than I was, 10, 20, 30 years ago. Because I actually am just better as a person, in the sense that I have made all these reflections. I've come to terms with all the things that used to bother me and hang-ups I had. And now I'm just grateful for what I've had and what I hopefully will have in front of me. Do you think age or maturing process matters a lot in this?
I'm fully aligned with you, Richard, in this regard, and I think it has a lot to do with it. But I would say, let's just look at it in two different ways here. If we are just grinding through it, we're pushing through it, we're not speaking to anyone about it, then the question is, are we growing through this? That's questionable. But if we are going through a very challenging time and we reach out to help and we're seeking support, we're hanging in conversations, I believe that we are growing through it. And I can draw the analogy back to someone who has an alcohol problem again. And we have this saying in 12-step programs, there's two ways to deal with this. You can be dry or you can be sober. And here's the difference. Someone who's dry is someone who might say, well, I have a month off drinking. Let's say they take January off. What happens on February 1? They're going to go on a bender. They will have a big drinking session. That means that they were just white-knuckling themselves through January and they couldn't wait for that drink. That's not being sober. Someone who's sober say, well, I will start by having this month off, and what I will do, I will work on myself to try to figure out what are the feelings and emotions that I need that drink on. Why am I going to have that drink when I'm stressed after work? And then tackle that, the root cause of it. That is sobriety. So I think we can apply that also, Richard, in our life. So the question is, aging without having conversations, then perhaps, yes, we will mature. But if we are aging and we're combining this with safe spaces, coaching, therapy, consulting, or coaching, or like what I did with my son and that relationship, which is unique, by the way. That woman who on Orchard Road, that psychologist, said there's never been a father who just walked in here to say, I'm a useless dad, I want to be a better dad. She said I was the first one, but that would be my encouragement. And that is, I think, proper aging, Richard.
Yeah. I would very much agree with that. And I think clearly people have different starting positions. I've always been very lucky to have a small but very close number of friends that I am pretty much in constant contact with, from everything from sporting results to how their kids are doing. But it's also something you actually have to work on. And I do think women are infinitely better at that than men. We are just genetically, predisposed to be more inclined to say, I can cope. I can deal with this on my own. I'm supposed to deal with this on my own. I'm supposed to be the hunter-gatherer, and push through all the hardship and all this tough stuff out there. That's my role in life.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna wrap it up. I'm seeing a change in women and females. By the way, I think the digital world has closed down a lot of that interaction, the physical interaction that women are known for, and I actually think that there's a bigger problem happening there, loneliness in particular. There's a lot of women who are more isolated than they've ever been. So I think that's probably something that's not being recognised, and it will potentially be recognised. But Nick, you kind of went through it as a list, but just to leave everyone just like really clearly, like with the to-dos, to deal with challenging times. I personally, when I heard you talk about that structure, I've got a problem. Who do I need to go and find to help me address that problem? This person, this person, this person. And I love the story with your son, but just give us the list to-dos.
Yeah. And it's actually, I call it the 5 steps to holistic leadership. And we can say that's leadership at work or leading ourselves holistically. And I'm writing this, it's my second book. I'm writing it right now. So the 5 steps then is the first step I call surrender. So it's having the awareness of what is not right in my life. Is it an alcohol addiction? Am I spending too much money on shopping or social media? So then surrender that. And then after that is really to getting some connection with other people, right? Well, it may be a coach or psychiatrist or a friend or someone to reach out to get that connection with other people. And through that, then we're finding ourselves, working ourselves. And then the third one is purpose. And I know it's a big word, and companies done a lot to try to find purpose in the work. And we have perhaps purpose at work, but then it's also questioning ourselves. What are the causes that are meaningful for us, and finding that purpose? And then the fourth is really that goal setting I spoke about, that we set goals in all 8 areas of our lives on the wheel of life. And so we don't only have business and career, but we have other meaningful, and getting that holistically right. And then finally, the accountability and discipline is the last step to hold it all together. So that's the 5 steps that I use for myself. That's what I use for my coaching and therapy clients, and also when I do workshops and so on. So I will keep you posted on when the book is out with these steps as well.
No, it's great, really clear. But also ownership. You got to take ownership, right? That the underlining everything. You said it at the end, the accountability, and I think that's what people are struggling with, the ownership. That's great, Nick. Thank you. Really appreciate you being here. Anyone want to say anything before we let him be free?
No, he needs to go training. There are more medals to be won.
Yeah. He's a monster. You should see some of the stuff he's doing. It's great.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thank you
Nick.
so much.
Really appreciate it. Take care. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So there you go. It's like the opposite of the manosphere. That personal accountability while still being strong, and the positive side of things. That's my takeaway. But when I heard him present that structure, especially the story with his son during the pandemic, because he was heartbroken that he couldn't see his son. He was absolutely heartbroken, and he was talking about it on Facebook, and you really, because we live in a world where our families are all over the place. So we understand the pain. So yeah, how do I fix it? Not wallowing in it. Any other thoughts?
I want to go back to this sort of environment thing a little, and I just also had another conversation with head of physics department, Cambridge actually, and I had one before with the one in Oxford, and they both got new buildings, and the thing about them is that they had the people design the buildings, the people as in the ones who are using it, who are going to be using it. So they kind of work together over, with the architects, engineers, and all the rest of it, because there are three elements. First of all, these are highly sophisticated buildings, because you do measurements over kind of like, everything from the tiniest fraction of an electron kind of scale to extreme precision and accuracy. So the fact that you have a truck running in a motorway 10 miles away makes a difference to your measurement. Just think about that kind of thing. So it completely ruins it or makes it possible. So that's that side of it. So they need to be involved in kind of like just how it works and where things are placed and all the rest of it. So the practical environment and the world outside makes a difference. And the second is that it's a habited space, because people spend pretty much all their lives in the labs. These are geeks; they never go home, kind of thing. And
they might not even have friends.
They may not even have friends. And I think that takes on to the third part, because it is that community, and is creating the space for that sort of community. And in that community, what really matters to them, even more than the space for the experiments, is that space for communication, inspiration, because that's how it works in that way. So this is a way of thinking about what a safe space in a sense is, because you need space for communication. That means space for disagreement, because if you don't have the disagreement, you never have the inspiration for something different. You only have the consensus, and the consensus is not how physics works. But it can get very heated in that disagreement. So you need this actual space that allows you to have that. You need some openness about the space that allows for the disagreement to be dissipated, so that you can lead on into inspiration. And the people created that, as opposed to an architect trying to create it. And what struck me out of this conversation is that both these departments, which are physics departments, had the people themselves design it.
I bet you it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
the final output.
But it's something about the fact that they actually felt the need to have that, to have that be their own accountability. It can't be delivered to them, and I think this is the part where we think about officers, we think about those sort of things. We think about, let me create a safe space for someone in an office. That's not really quite how it works. It's like, if you go to a hospital and you go to a prayer room, well, it's just some guy who's made a broom cupboard into a prayer room.
Yeah, it's kind of like the citizen assembly sort of idea, right? Bringing the people into the mix. I want to get someone who's an expert on citizen assemblies, if any of you guys know someone that we could ask to come and join us. But should we move on to the war and just sort of get a sense of, it sounds like we've all had a very different experience this week with the war, but anyone want to kick us off? I've got a few thoughts, but I'm happy for someone else to start.
I thought the best comment of the week was the flash that came, I think, yesterday morning when the Iranians stated, it seems like President Trump is negotiating with himself. And I think it kind of sums up the disconnect between what the US administration is trying to portray and what the reality on the ground is.
Yeah.
I'm still very much in the camp saying that the Iranians are pretty much exactly where they want to be. Apart from the fact they've been bombed and people have lost their lives, politically speaking, with what's happened, this is exactly where they want to be.
Yeah.
From here on, all they're going to do is extract either enormous concessions to end this shit show for the West, or they will plow on and they might have much bigger targets and goals in mind.
Yeah.
I think the 15 points that Trump brought out, this is so I've been looking at this and say, okay, let me imagine what's happening here, and let me imagine both sides of this, right? So if I'm Trump, am I genuine about wanting to do this, or is it because I need a few more thousand troops there and I need more missiles and those sort of things to be shipped over to the regions in order to be able to carry on bombing and all the rest of it? And so you look down at the 15 points, and the 15 points are: you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. They're basically saying, I'm not negotiating peace, I'm negotiating your surrender to me. And you're going to surrender to me because if you don't surrender to me, I'm going to bomb the shit out of you, kind of thing. So they're very direct, one-sided in that way. And so I'm going to go over and I turn the chessboard over, and I'm now going to play black. I've been playing white, I'm not going to play black. And on the black side, what I'm going to see. And the one thing I'm going to think of is, you know what, you guys bombed me, right? So my neighbor goes along and drives his car into my fence. And I'm going to say, look, you got to pay for this. There's no way I'm going to say, yeah, that's okay, let's shake hands. And you know what, I will give you my garden. It's this case, you got to pay for this. And as far as the Iranians are concerned, this goes to a little bit towards kind of Richard's comment. What's the worst that happens if I'm kind of like fanatical? Is I die for my cause. Which is actually not the worst that happens if I'm fanatical.
No.
Got it. So you are going to pay for it, because the worst you can do is to make me die for my cause, which is what I'm here, my purpose in life is to do. So you've got this kind of thing, and then I think, well, is Trump going to actually pay compensation to Iran? I find that hard to, imagine. Is the $200 billion that Taxeth is asking Congress for going to be spent in helping Iran to rebuild? I find that hard to imagine. So I don't know where the negotiation goes. I think there's a chance that it comes into something good. There's a possibility that they come along and think, you know what, we are actually, kind of being a bit stupid. We are going to break up the fight. But from their current perspectives on each other, that's not going to happen. So a lot does depend on what other countries are talking to them about and how they may be in that way. The difficulty in this situation in here is Iran has been under sanction for a very long time. So its mentality is, you're just going to tell me off anyway, aren't you? Why am I going to listen to you? Even their friendly neighbors have implicitly kind of stood away from them under that situation. So it's a so I think it's possible that this war comes to some kind of positive resolution. I think the other aspect of this that people for some reason just don't really talk about is the atrocity that Israel is doing.
Yeah, and Lebanon as well, right?
Yeah, well, not Lebanon, Gaza. I mean, what is it doing? Why is everybody saying, oh, we mustn't talk about that? When that's so clearly, even beyond anything else. I mean, they're getting troops in there. They're determined to bring all of those under its, kind of into its dominion in that way.
Yeah, so I wanted to what I've been listening to lots of different experts, just trying to understand where this could go, because I can't see a way out of the situation that is good for the US, good for Iran, good for Israel. I just can't see, and I can see lots of bad paths, right? But where we are now, to me, just feels like a checkmate. So you were using the chess analogy earlier. So I've been tracking a bunch of generals and former intelligence leaders and those sort of guys, right? So apparently 7,000 US troops are on the way or have already arrived, and they're talking about ground sort of forces doing something. They're talking a lot about those islands in the Straits of Hormuz. And then you look at the geography, and all of those islands are either overlooked by these massive cliffs. Now, yes, Israel and the US has air sort of superiority, but it doesn't take much to get a couple of people on a cliff to blow a rocket into a group of Americans. Then we've heard about all of the US military bases across the Middle East have basically they're unusable. So it feels like we're at a point where, and we're obviously hearing Hegseth's prayers and all that sort of stuff. So it kind of feels like the only path forward where we could potentially move forward is that the US backs down, which means that it has to admit defeat. But if it admits defeat, that's not a good thing for America, right? So Trump's desperately trying to get Iran to admit defeat, so it doesn't have to admit defeat. But if they do go in on the ground, whether it's to try and claim the islands or to try and find the uranium that no one knows where it is, it might be here, it might be there, sort of thing. We could be looking at a slaughter of US troops, which of course the Americans are not going to tolerate. So, and then you were talking about the Iranian leadership, right? These are not nice people, but when this war is over, if they lose, it's death or exile for them. So they've actually got no choice but to continue fighting. So to me, it's just checkmate, and that's the problem. Like if America ramps this up like it has in wars in the past, where it hasn't said, mate, we need to get out of here now before it gets any worse. If they don't do that now, we're going to see what we've seen in the past, which is carnage on the ground, but civilian deaths of a massive magnitude, but long-term implications that just continue to roil the whole world. And so I think that's kind of the feeling I've had this week. I can't see any way.
I think there is this side that actually, some of these things we can't really understand how it's quite going to work out. So we play war game scenarios. We do sort of we imagine, we do game theoretic analysis and all of those things. In the end, there is a lot that's kind of connected with this, and in the end, that everything is kind of connected together. So the Iranians are going to be connected with how Asia is going to come through, and the oil is the impact on oil affects Asia more than it affects Europe and America, which is why Europe and America doesn't really care about it in that way. And that there are kind of, in a sense, a kind of I like to think of it as kind of like a cultural connection that's kind of ethereal in the air in that way, come along in that way. What you see is the Americans certainly don't have that. So going on to Hegseth's prayer and those things, which is an atrocious thing that he says in it, and it demonstrates that there's no compassion in America. There may be compassion in Americans, but there is no compassion in America. That's what the world is seeing in what there is. Is there
no competence either? No competence either. That's
who knows about that? I mean, competence is they certainly think they're very competent, and Trump certainly thinks he's incredibly competent. And so, but the issue is, can this somehow diffuse? Something about the passage of time can do that. If we don't keep bombing each other, something about that passage of time can just mellow things over. That's why there's a phrase about time healing and so on. Tensions are high. Both sides have, in some sense, everything to lose, and kind of by stepping down in that way. Both sides have, in some sense, everything to gain by stepping down. I'm not sure how it comes out in terms of negotiation or whatever. The only way I can see as a actual kind of stepping down that happens is like agreeing to eventually talk type, kind of thing, and allowing that to phase on through. I don't see a shaking hands and patting on the back and kind of like a bro hug and says, "Okay, guys, we made up now." In that way, I don't think that's going to come. But the ways in which this can be resolved in a stalemate without it going on to that thing.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask Joe in a minute, but I'll just give a couple of Donald Trump statements. So the articles in CNN, it says Trump is baffled that Iran won't end the war he started. So a couple of the comments. They want to make a deal so badly, but they're afraid to say it because they figure they'll be killed by their own people. They're also afraid they'll be killed by us. And then another one. The Iranian negotiators are very different and strange. They are begging us to make a deal, which they should be doing since they have been militarily obliterated with zero chance of a comeback, and yet they publicly state that they are only looking at our proposal. Wrong! Obviously, for Donald J. Trump. But, it's kind of like... when you got nothing to lose,
I can see a scenario. I can see a scenario where they think they're talking to Iranians and they're not.
Yeah.
I can definitely see a scenario where, there are people who want this to end and they're saying, look, I'm happy to talk. Let's see what we can do. And I'll go and talk to whatever. And as far as Trump's concerned, it's like, these people want to talk and it's the Iranians, but actually they're not talking to them.
Yeah.
It's certainly not beyond the competence of the US to be in that situation.
Yeah. Joe, do you want to jump in with any thoughts? Put you on the spot?
Well, the thing that got me was the 15-point plan, right? I think the 15 demands that you were referred to earlier. I think what really happened with that is that the number 15 was mentioned first, and then they filled up the list. If you saw that moment on this is on Air Force One where he just said there were 15 demands, and someone asks what were they, and he kind of said, I can't remember what it was, but I think something about the nukes or whatever it was, and it was demand number 1, 2, and 3. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like the kid that comes in and says like when a kid makes an audacious claim of some kind, and then you go like, oh yeah, can you show me? And you go like, yeah, so I think that they have that kind of a thing happening right now. It's the kind of it's kind of a fantastical sort of a approach to trying to work their way out of the war. He's writing a kind of a movie, outcome, for it. And I think that the real challenge that they're going to have is this: is like, you've entered this in such a way that you've broken all the rules, and now you want people to kind of live by some sort of rule.
Yeah.
And that is really not an expectation that's gonna fly. If you've in the process of, they say prosecuting a war, and so you hear words like that, and you're talking about, you hear things like suing for peace and that kind of stuff. That all is based on the idea that there is some sort of backbone that you can work against, the rules, the laws that also cover armed conflict and stuff like that. And if you're not going to follow those rules, you can't expect to go back to them. And I think it's part of what we were in the prep for today. We're talking about how we're no longer in this world where we have a rule book We actually have more a situation where now it's the jungle, and we notice that this particular creature does this kind of thing in these circumstances. So we have to try to make that thing happen, right? I mean, like even the idea, true or not, the idea that the Iranians are sending him a gift. I mean, to me, it's a masterstroke. If someone came along and realized that, if you offer the gorilla a banana, it changes it changes the way the fight's going, right? And I really think that's kind of the way it has to go as well. This is something where there is no negotiation to be had, because you don't have the levers of control aren't even there. And I was just thinking about how, if you're trying to think about this in another sense, imagine you're trying to do a deal with America right now as a party. So you're not even Iran. You're just somebody else, right? You're a third country trying to do a deal with America. And what you have to realize is you're actually doing a deal with Republican America. And as and when things change and as the tide swings, your agreements don't really mean that much anymore, because what you've learned is, well, everything is just, it's all based on the season that you're in right now. So it makes it very difficult to do these long-term plans that you have, and it actually makes other countries much more, they're much better places to start doing business with, because there's a sense of the certainty of the future, right?
Yeah.
So if you talk about any kind of economy where you can be certain of the future, it's actually, for me, it's countries like China.
Yeah.
Whether you have the way to engage the economy is a different thing, but it's a more predictable sort of thing. The levers are connected at the base to the machinery. It's not just, I'm going to make all the movement that goes along with this, but they're not connected to anything.
No, but it's got to do with the rationale of the leadership, right? So China is predictable because you can always articulate what the rational moves to do are, and they pretty much stick to them. Yes, there are, a few S turns, but generally speaking, the direction is very much set out because it's the rational way to do. Yeah. This is not the case with the US at the moment. And ultimately, I cannot help but thinking that this is completely domestically, politically motivated. He knows that a shit show in the November elections means he's a lame duck for 2 years, because you have now effectively put limitations on what the president can do without congressional approval. So you're trying to somehow alter the most likely outcome of that election by going to war with another country. Gee, have we seen that before? I think so. So, and that it just increases the likelihood that there won't be a back down. I mean, the numbers they're talking about, they're ridiculous. You're sending 7,000 troops. You need 100 times that number to have a meaningful impact. It's an enormous country. It's a vast country. And I mean, US will not have any appetite for that kind of expedition in light of what have happened over the last half century. So
and military morale's at a super low, right?
Yeah. So they're not going to go down that route. They will keep trying to use technological advantage to press it home, and the Iranian is having none of it, because at the end of the day, it's like, gee, we've been under sanctions for decades. We know that playbook. You've thrown the best you can at me, and you killed a few people, but we're still here, we're still standing. And you know what? From here on, it's looking pretty bright, because I think I can put a toll on the whole Hormuz Strait. That will probably give me billions and billions for years to come. And everyone but the US in the West will be happy to accept that price now.
Yeah.
I think there is another part that we haven't really mentioned that we should mention. I mean, you're talking about negotiating with someone who breaks every negotiation they have entered into.
Yeah.
Right. So Trump gets into power. First thing he does is cancels the treaty he signed with Canada and Mexico in his previous presidency. The next thing
that was because it was a bad deal, though.
Exactly, which he signed. The next thing he does is he goes along and do all these tariffs, and actually rescinds everything that he said about them. And then you go into actually what happened in Israel, Gaza, and all those things. They had the negotiations. It was the U.S. and the Israelis who pulled out of them as it progressed into the next stage to start bombing again. So there is no reason anyone expects a negotiation to result in anything other than more bombing.
Yeah. And that's why, so Joe, I just want to go back to one of your earlier comments about filling in the 15 after the 15 were released. It sounds like when I play Trivial Pursuit with my mother, she knows every answer until you put her on the spot and she doesn't know any other people's questions, of course, not her own. Because this all leads into the impacts, right? So Christine Lagarde basically said she doesn't think the stock markets are weighing the real risks of what's going on, even like a little bit. And I'm like looking at the stock markets, and you guys can explain this better, because it's just like, because every sign is months, years, decades, and this is still the case. Like nothing's changed on that front, right? But so a small amount of boats are coming through. It's single digit. I think I heard about 6%, which is tiny. We've got the Philippines have called an energy emergency. I'm not really sure, what the meaning of that is from an emergency government thing. In the New York Times, Trump's threats to Europe put its leaders in a double bind over Iran. I think, David, you said the oil embargo doesn't impact Iran, Europe as much as the rest of the world, but it does impact it as far as prices go, and it's already, so basically the people in Europe don't want Europe to get involved in the war because it's an illegal war, but at the same time there's going to be a backlash, which of course rising populism, nationalism sort of comes up, and then you've got all of the different impacts from we've talked about last week, fertilizers, which we're in planting season all over the world. It's spring or autumn everywhere, and so it's winter crops or summer crops ready to go in, helium, sulfur, and then I look across Asia. I mentioned the Philippines. In Thailand, they're ordering people to not run their air conditioners as much, but it's going through extreme heat event at the moment. Sri Lanka, they had a terrible time during the pandemic, and now they're back, in this situation. Myanmar, you can imagine, and all of these countries are now in their heat season. So, the impacts across the region are brutal, and it's not going to be fixed in the short term, and the poorest people are going to suffer the most. And my heart is hurting so much from that perspective, because I lived here during the pandemic. I lived in Thailand. I watched the people suffer. I watched them lining up for food. As the weeks and the months drew on, I watched people get skinnier. I watched their clothes get shabbier. It has a real impact on people, and these are the people that serve tables in holiday destinations, or the ones out in the farms picking our food. They're the ones that are going to be really suffering. So I'm feeling that heart sort of burden rising again after having watched the suffering the first time. And I always knew the suffering was going to come, but it's such a stupid bloody reason that we're here. That Donald Trump was convinced that this was a good idea. And every leader before knew that this was a stupid idea. And here we are. And our neighbours are the ones that are going to suffer. Singapore will be okay for the longest time, because it's got a very practical, forward, long-term thinking government. I'm listening to the Prime Minister and some of the leaders here speaking on what they're doing and how they're thinking about it. And of course, it's pragmatic. It's Singapore, right? But
all we have really is a better boat in rough seas. We're not. I don't think we're in a different situation. We just have a better boat. That's all it is,
Mm-hmm. But it's been a planned boat.
Yeah, but you will need a bigger boat.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is, you look at what's going on, and we talk about things that are directly related. You look at copper, which is not directly related, but it's actually is related to what we really think what's going to go on and in what happens. And it's really, in terms of it's moved down in some percentage term, sort of, maybe seem to be kind of a reasonable sort of large move as such, but for copper, it's not. And when you look at where it is on the trend it is over time, it's hardly budged, basically. So effectively, to the comments, the markets never price in how things will turn out. They price in how things people want to turn out.
Yeah,
Can you explain that to me? Because I don't know, the whole world's run by these dudes, and it's like
shocking.
They don't make any sense to me.
Well, at the end of the day, it's flogging a horse, right? So you're always going to flog it by saying it's going to win the race. You're not going to flog it by actually telling them what its chances of winning the race are.
No, but that's fantasy versus reality. Like the reality is
but there is no reality in the market prices. The market prices have separated from reality for a long time. The whole asset inflation that we've experienced over the past 2 decades is that separation of reality from that sort of fantasy. That's what asset inflation means.
So are we at the shittification of the markets? Or it's gone to its extreme point?
We've financialized it. It used to be that, that starting chapter in our book, The Unsustainable Truth, about the vineyards and how, it's now owned by, the Canadian pension funds.
Yeah.
Is that process where we've financialized it. It's no longer about producing grapes. It's about getting the return for your pension.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a case of I'm not actually looking at the grapes. I'm looking at how can I flock this thing. And the way I flock this thing is to say, well, there are all these parties who can create wine tastings and all these things that you can have. And this is going to produce a fantastic vintage over these times because the soil is like this and all the rest of it. So you flock the horse by saying what races is going to win. You don't flock the horse by actually telling you about the horse.
So I was just going to talk about the markets just for a little bit. Like, for instance, if you look at the world right now and you say, are we in great areas of uncertainty? Are we doing all the different things? Do we feel good about ourselves as a planet? Right. I think you'd say on the whole, we don't feel so confident about where we are. Right. So that usually translates to something where gold is going to be on the way up. Everybody, you'll hear every second thing you see financially, someone says, good time to invest in gold, go into gold, whatever it is. Someone's saying something about that. But what's been happening actually in the price, because I trade gold, what's been happening actually of late is that gold is dumped again, right? It's just it's pushed down, and it doesn't make sense until you figure out what it's really happening, right? There is, on one hand, there is what the value of things intrinsically are. So based on that, if things are really going to be priced based on what their value really is, your glass of water should be really expensive. Your air conditioner or your air filters should be really, really expensive. That's the thing, that the price doesn't really reflect how valuable something is. But price reflects what people are doing with the actual commodity. So gold right now, why it's had this huge plummet is because a lot of people who are participating in the gold markets got in because they were thinking, you know what, the world is going to pot, so gold is going to go up. So they pursue the gold, they pursue the positions in gold, and they go in, and not only just accumulating gold for themselves in terms of safety. What people are going in is going in on leveraged positions. So your $1 lets you buy $1,000 worth of a gold position, which is tremendous if you are running in high profits. But the moment the market just turns down a little bit and it forces your hand open, your leveraged position becomes something that just gets deleveraged instantaneously, and it cascades. So why we're seeing a situation where the world should be very unsure about stuff. It should be running to the safety of gold, and yet gold's price is falling because we're actually watching a market running separate from reality. It's not to do with whether or not this is going to be more useful down the road. It actually is based on what the last price was, and who is where we think the next price can be. If we all lose confidence and think that the price can't sustain this because there are not enough people to buy it to keep it going up, then it's going to go down, and that's what we see in the markets as well. So this confused me when I was younger about why you could hear good news and then a stock would go up, go down in price or whatever it was. Because essentially price has nothing to do with it. Price is a beast all to its own. It is psychological. It is how people behave, and if you apply the idea of just a scarcity mindset and greed to how a price is going up and down, and you look at it in terms of momentum, how as things are going in a certain way and continuing to move a certain way, and looks like it's going a certain way, you can more or less understand how prices work. And I hope this has helped a little bit, rather than confused a bit more.
So I've got a question about that, right? So there's been several stories that China's been steadily buying gold for a long time, and that hasn't stopped. So that would benefit China right now. They'd be able to buy a lot more gold at cheaper prices, right? So your T-shirt today is "Science is Magic," Joe. So I'm wondering, are the markets magic? But more Wizard of Oz kind of magic. So, because in this situation, in this war, when you look at it from every perspective, and you listen to all of the experts, nobody is saying there's a way out. Nobody, right? So it would make sense that gold would be consistently, or at least staying where it is. But my understanding is the price of gold dropped down because the price of oil shot up. So the money's moved. And of course, then we've got all the corruption that's going on in the US government where people are buying things and all that sort of stuff. So what's going on there from a gold perspective, Richard?
Absolutely. You have a very practical thing of what's going on. And I think this is incredibly important because the process Joe describing is essentially correct, right? This is the mindset. This is how the momentum drives prices. However, there is also a physical reality going on now that people are not getting because it's not being highlighted in the news, and it's more actually for the people trading these commodities, is that you see oil at $93 or whatever it was this morning for WTI, which is American oil, being delivered into US pads, and Brent, which is the European benchmark, is trading like $14 higher, $106, $107. These are reference prices for all but the very small volume which actually gets delivered. So reference prices are used because they're publicly traded, and then the people with the oil actually buy and sell cargoes based on these reference prices, but with premiums or discounts. So historically, Iranian oil traded with discount because they weren't allowed to sell it very much, and Russian oil with a discount because they weren't allowed to sell it. They were under sanctions, etc. What we see happening over the last 2 weeks is actually that real oil on ships being delivered into refineries are trading at more like $150, $160 a barrel because you can't get hold of it. Now, that's the physical reality when you are stopping the major producing area in the world from shipping its oil, that whatever oil is out there is going to get much more bid up than what the prices are indicating for a small portion that's going to get delivered into certain depots. The people who need to buy this oil on many levels are actually at state level. They need to raise the money to buy this oil. So they're selling gold and they're selling American treasuries. And that's why interest rates globally keep climbing, because they need to raise the cash.
Yeah.
But for someone who has reasonable cash and reasonable depots and supplies available, possibly China, I have no doubt that they are still buyers of gold here over the long term because it's part of a much longer diversification plan. And actually, their gold holdings are very, very small compared to their vast reserves they're holding. For a country like India, who clearly has been raising cash here for energy they desperately need, they don't really have an alternative but to sell gold into this market.
Yeah, right.
I think
so. So the countries like the Philippines and Thailand and stuff, they'll be worse off ultimately.
Absolutely, they have smaller reserves, right?
Well, I mean, I think that goes without saying. It's unfortunate, but it goes without saying.
Yeah.
I think the point to remember back in March 2020, oil price hit negative $37. You were paid $37 to buy oil. That's how kind of the price itself is not necessarily representative of anything particular. And that was a real traded price that people were doing there. And it was not an electronic glitch or anything like that. And it was a consequence of a combination of factors. COVID, there was a price war between Russia and Saudi in terms of OPEC production versus non-OPEC production along in there, limits to storage, and then on top of that, you have people trading and speculating on it into contract closes and all the rest of it. So the interesting thing is if you look at the Institute of the IEA, whatever that stands for now, the International Energy Agency or something, I think, which is basically the international body is kind of based the body that is paid by governments around the world to analyze the energy market, to energy in that way. Traditionally, very much oil and gas and coal based. Now increasingly more renewables included within there. Their forecast in the latest oil market report, which comes out monthly. The latest one came out 12th of March, so it's kind of a couple of weeks into this conflict. And we've had the airplanes and all of those things. What it was projecting in terms of oil demand was a dip currently into sort of like April sort of thing. But by September, it would be back above what it was before the whole thing started in terms of barrels of days of consumption that we need. And
So that
essentially
will-
kind of recovery. Yeah.
That will be from all of the other oil fields and gas fields around the world being able to sort of meet that demand, or?
Well, how you meet it is a different thing, but that's the demand.
All right, so they're expecting it to be back to where it was before the war started.
Over
But
before what the war started by
But the
about
ha-
May, June.
But the how isn't being explained.
Well, the how is then a matter of how expensive can you make it to get more supply out and all the rest of it. But essentially, it is actually saying the projection. I mean, this is what I'm saying this to point out the fallacy in many ways of this thing, because when you've had the power cut and you spend your last money trying to charge your phone battery or whatever it is that you do, when the war finishes, you don't have the money to recover. But the economic projection from the economists is that that money is infinite.
Right, okay.
You will always have that demand coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
The fact
okay.
that you've now starved and you can't work anymore doesn't factor into the economic projections, which is why the market prices never actually price what it's going to be.
That's right, and it's why none of this stuff ever really made sense to me. Now you're helping me understand why. Like, it wasn't me being stupid. Like, Richard, you just linked the gold pet together with the dip with the up. Like, finally, like, you've linked something that I was like, but they're saying this and that, saying that, and and I sort of think of other people out there just going, oh, well, what? So thank you, David. You've just made sense of that, which was basically, it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, oh God, we live in interesting times, don't we? All right, I want us to move on because I want us to stick to our commitment. I'm sharing an article from The Nerve, which talks about it never really was about being woke. But What a Waste 3.0 is a waste report, and the title is Global Snapshot of Solid Waste Management Towards Circularity until 2050. Surprise, surprise. The waste surge is ahead of schedule. Everything's ahead of schedule, if you haven't noticed. 2.56 billion tons were generated in 2022, a level not expected until 2030. And it's expected to grow by 50% by 2050. And that will be 3.86 billion tons if we just keep going as we're going, which we are. And I've cleaned a lot of beaches, and I've heard a lot of people, some in the denial movement. The people in the plastics and the waste denial movement are the most entertaining for me, because there's one guy, I won't even mention his name because I don't care about him, up in the mountains of Canada, looking out over the trees, and he's saying, "I can't see any waste," and I'm like, "Yeah, oh, okay." And then he was trying to prove that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch was a conspiracy theory, and spent a lot of time showing all these photos and these angles with this land behind it and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, if you really want to prove that it's fake, get on a boat and go there. And if it's not there, I will acknowledge that it's bullshit. But that's not the experience we're having out here in this part of the world where the colonial waste is being shipped. So yeah, so the waste crisis, it's only getting better. So my lovely husband said, "No one would ever dare suggest you're stupid." Thank you, Dulce. I don't know, this whole waste thing, it's like,
it's ugly. It's very, very ugly. And again, what you're going to find here is that you're running into physical reality.
Yeah.
Because you're actually now starting to have real constraints about where to store it. We can only landfill as much in the Western world, and we can only ship as much to other countries for them to deal with the garbage, literally.
Yeah. And they literally can't.
Exactly. That's the physical reality of what's going on.
And I think what Richard's pointing out is important, because the issue of our environmental kind of problems is not the resource we use, is the capacity to deal with what we've done with it. And the sustainability issue isn't whether we run out of things that we can use, is that we run out of capacity to deal with what we've used it for, which is what climate change is about, which is what the microplastics and all of those things is about. Is the consequence and where we can chuck that stuff. Because it's like, you've got a week in your home and you've cooked a lot of food and you got all the food left around, and over a week is fine, but after a month and if nobody picks it up, you got a bit of a problem at you.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of thing that's the crux of it. And that's a net, it's like that positive space and negative space sort of thing. That's like a negative space. We don't see that. It's like the photo negative, the capacity that we use up in order to chuck our things away and deal with those things. That's not what we see. We see the lumps of metals that we need, and we see all of those things. But we don't see actually that space up, the negative of that.
I think that's the thing that we're at right now, David, is I think for the longest time, most people didn't see it. Now everyone can see it, because, well, first of all, the big deal was when China said, "No, we're not taking your waste anymore." And that was the big deal. I can't remember what year it was. It wasn't that long ago. And then all these other countries were still accepting waste. And this waste is, Thailand, they just this year, they stopped it. I don't know if it has stopped. Malaysia, Philippines just had a big fight with somebody because it was full of e-waste, a ship full of e-waste, which wasn't the agreed waste. But it gets dumped or in these pits, so-called landfill, right? But it's always near water. And so these big monsoonal sort of storms come through, and it picks it all up and it goes in the water and it goes into the sea, and it eventually ends up back where it came from. And it just took a while for that full cycle of wherever it goes. So when we were on the Andaman Sea, there's no patch. What was happening is the currents were sort of turning it around and taking it around, and it eventually would go all the way down off the tip of Africa, and it's now basically polluting the shores of Antarctica. You know, so that depending on the currents, right, which way it goes. Air quality. So another report that came out this week, only 13 countries in the world breathe clean air. And that is in Europe, it's Andorra, Estonia, and Iceland. And for the rest of the world, it's Australia, Barbados, Bermuda, French Polynesia, Grenada, New Caledonia, Panama, Puerto Rico, Reunion, and US Virgin Islands. So 91% of the 143 countries failed to meet safe limits. The most polluted are Pakistan, Bangladesh, Tajikistan, and Chad, and DRC. And of course, all of the 25 most polluted cities are in India, Pakistan, or China. So, doing so good.
Must do better. Note to self.
And then State of the Climate Report 2025. Who wants to sort of, I put some bullet points here. Who wants to talk about what came out there? Because that was another good one, humans. David, do you want to talk about it, or Richard?
Well, I mean, you know, it's okay. You know, the state of the climate is terrible, and in terms of kind of the CO2 and stuff, in terms of the planetary boundaries, the most recent sort of updated ones indicate that climate is now way over the boundary more than any of the other problems.
Yeah.
So climate change is here. Don't think it's something to come. And as we said before, you know, it impacts things in indirect ways without you realizing. So that's kind of what it is. So, you know, the report itself, I think what's really interesting in terms of the climate, because the State of Climate report just kind of says, okay, it's a shit show. But what's interesting about it is we're entering likely into an El Nino year. Mm-hmm. So we are seeing heat waves across all over the world at the moment. You know, America has had the most bizarre kind of weather over this season from the start of the year, between severe cold storms to severe heat waves to, you know, hailstones the size of grapefruits falling in that way. So we are in for a bumpy ride here. I think that kind of might take my short take from it. You know, hang on, you're in for a bumpy ride. You can't get out of it. No one is going to get out of this.
I'm just looking for the planetary boundaries, the last image of it. I can't find it just to share it. But yeah, no, definitely a bumpy ride. So we have experienced the hottest decade ever from 2015 to 2025, the 11 hottest years on record. Energy imbalance at record high. So that's the amount of sun coming in versus being released. So we're out of balance. The oceans are absorbing massive heat. Ice is in retreat, and there's some really interesting stuff coming out of Antarctica. Some of it will take years and years. And then extreme weather is worsening. But what David was just talking about with El Nino coming, it's not just an El Nino. It's not even just a super El Nino. They're calling it now a Godzilla El Nino. And that's only just popped up in the last week. And just to give you an idea, the last two Godzilla and El Ninos were 2015 to 2016 and 1997 to 1998. What this means is sea surface temperatures in the central eastern Pacific will rise by 2 degrees Celsius or more above normal, often 3 degrees Celsius. Prolonged duration, basically it's going to last 12 to 18 months. It's usually less than 12 months. And global scale disruptions, so droughts, floods, heat waves, and storms far beyond what typical El Nino impacts usually bring. So just to quickly take you through it, by region, Southeast Asia will see severe droughts and wildfires. We're off to, so this time last year, Singapore just released its 2025 report. Last March was unbelievably wet. This March, it's really, really dry. So we had no rain in January. We had rain from Chinese New Year Eve, and now we're back into dry. And it's really weird living in the tropics when it's not green. It's really weird. So severe droughts and wildfires. So in Australia, when it comes up to next summer, we could be seeing one of those really mega extreme fire seasons. South America, extreme flooding. East Africa, heavy rains and flooding. Western US, heavy rainfall and mudslides. And globally, they're expecting obviously a spike in average temperatures. And we never really go back down after that. So, yeah, that's Godzilla El Nino.
Note to self: much do better.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I think I've been doing this week is writing a talk that I'm going to give tomorrow, and is on this new approach to climate change, and is focused in the sense about businesses. And the aspect of this, that what all this brings, is that you just got to be more intentional about what it is that you're doing. You can't just go around thinking you're going to increase your profit and raise revenues or cut your costs and so on, because this thing isn't stopping. So when you think you've managed it, it's going to get worse again. So you just got to be more intentional. You've got to understand what it is that your customer sees in you and what it is that you're really motivated to do. And they got to join. If they don't join, you're in trouble in that way. And then you have this thing where you still need to deal with the climate, because the climate is the bag of stones that you always have to carry around with you. And it's going to keep dragging you down if the bag of stones gets heavy every time. So eventually it gets too much for you to carry. You're not Atlas. You can't actually carry the world on your shoulder in that way, but you've been forced to, or all of us in that way. And that's where the idea that you can actually, you need to leave those kind of oil and gas and coal in the ground. And the reason for that is much more than carbon. The reason for that is we got to find a way to make money without taking things out and burning sort of stuff. And that's how leaving them in the ground as the way to make money is kind of this new approach. Because we need money, and so we need a different sort of money. We need the sort of money that comes not from how you can repair what you've damaged, but from not having to do that in the first place.
Yeah. All right. And another thing that came up is so there's this report in the UK that the government didn't really want to release, but anyway, Britain's food supply at catastrophic risk of failure by 2030, and then George Monbiot, we're letting big corporations gamble with our lives, act now, or the food could run out. So we've talked about the big ag as a risk, because their whole business is in the it has to make more money, like the wine and the winery example at the beginning of your book. And if it doesn't make money, then it could collapse. If the big ag industry collapses, what happens to us, because we're not growing our own food? So start your own garden. All right, Joe. Meta and Google got hammered in the courts. There's another big Meta case on. I think I hate to see these guys sued out of business. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, I haven't had time to look at it, is OpenClaw. So this is getting a lot of coverage and attention. I just as a final discussion point to the AI people who aren't as clever as you. What is it? Why does it matter?
Well, I won't claim to be clever. I'll just claim to be able to do research really fast and try to understand things. So, I've been speaking about the agentic AI for quite a while, right? So when Manus first came out, you may have heard about it. It's now become it became a Singapore-based AI company, and it was the basic idea is that it could go out there and do things agentically for you. So you could go. It could read websites, it could do things for you, it could book things for you. And everyone's had some sort of way of doing it, as in like there was Companion from OpenAI. There were many ways of doing agentic AI. But what happened was, and I think it's out of Sweden as well. It's a software developer. He made all his money already from basically every time you've opened up your phone and read a PDF, you've touched the software that he created that made that so smooth and possible, right? Because I don't know if you remember the days when it was hard to read a PDF on your phone. So he was part of the solution that basically solves that for everybody. So he exited from that, middle on money, and actually stayed away from programming for the longest time, and then came back again thinking, this whole AI agents thing really needs to work better. It needs to be able to do what it's supposed to be able to do. And so he set out something, which was a project for himself to make it good, to try to create this thing that would work. So what OpenClaw is, it's gone through a few different names as well, by the way, but it's currently just called OpenClaw. Why it is so significant is because of the rate at which it was adopted in the world. To give you an idea, OpenClaw was so well received, it outperformed Linux in terms of the adoption. As in, like, it took Linux, I think, 10 years to achieve the rate of adoption. Linux is, by the way, another operating system which is very popular in the computing world amongst the computing programmers as well. But this was achieved in just 3 months for OpenClaw, and that is a very, very significant move forward. People, so they believe in this. It's open source. And the way it kind of moved, and if you just the thing about how fast it's moved is, it's because they created all kinds of ways for the community to develop it as well. So you could have an agent that was able to do things, but you could also have skills that you could add to the agent. So you could do a separate program, and you could put it on the market if you wanted to. So there was a whole market of extra skills. And now there's thousands and thousands of skills that you can now give to your agent, and this agent can work for you as well. So the idea now is that you can literally do all this stuff from your home on your computer, get it out there. So that's the big news. That's the idea that what it could do. Now, why it's kind of come it's sort of like back in the news again is because of all the controversy around what it can do as well. Because it has access to your screens, your information, your data. The potential for exploits can be very high. And of course, the people who are trying to exploit it have done so. So, in those skills that you were able to put into your agent, people have hidden other things as well, bits of code that would actually be able to exploit your setup. So people who use it for crypto, for instance, a good number of them were hit by a skill that also, while it was doing some trading for you, it was stealing your money, which is the way that works. But the big news is for this project that started off as this thing where they just tried to basically do this agent thing better. It is actually now that same mechanism that is actually going to power, I think, the next phase of AI development, because it's actually given rise to the possibility of doing a few things. So in NVIDIA, so all those problems I told you about, the security issues that come about because of that, it created, it first of all proved the concept that it could work, and also proved the concept that it could go wrong badly. And what NVIDIA did is they came along with a solution that says, well, here's how we can stop all the bad things from happening. So it came up with its own proprietary solution, which is going to be very popular because the proof of concept already happened with OpenClaw over those 3 months. It's like, it works, can do all the work, it can do all the stuff, it's just dangerous. And now what happened now is NVIDIA has released a version that has a condom. And for, I think it's $80,000 a corporate can deploy this on their system, and then they can have this agentic AI do the stuff. Now, that's on a computing platform on a network. What is very significant about this is that the next phase of this is where they're going to put it on a chip, and it's not going to be on a network. It will be agentic, and it will be on a machine that sits outside of a network, which means now robots are able to self-determine. So that's the kind of reason why it is so big in the world of programming. It has a lot of significance. It's a kind of significance that is there. It's just like, it's like blockchain. Blockchain really is so significant in terms of the whole programming world, but it might not feel like it affects you. OpenClaw has had that kind of impact on the programming world, because that's now how AI can really move forward. It's agentic AI anyway has moved forward in a big way. It's going to be the reason if I think down the road when the history books are written about how we arrived at machines that look after us, prepare our meals, and do different things and get all the chores done, and got rid of all the traditional jobs, it might come. I mean, OpenClaw will be a very big chapter in that.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. I always rely on Joe for a bit of a take. All right. So because we've just gone over time, so what's keeping you distracted? Give people something to relieve their brains.
You said it earlier, Andrea. It's growing your own food.
Yeah.
It's been a big thing for me over the last 2 years, and I'm kind of scaling up this year a little bit, trying new crops. Some cases, the definition of insanity is to repeat the process and expect a different outcome. But I am doing that for a few of the stuff I'm planting. Didn't work so well 5-10 years ago, but I'm going to give it another go. If it fails, then I'm done with it. And then I'm sticking to the staples that are working really, really well. And I'm just expanding the plots that I'm growing in. And I'm going to try to grow it a little bit more efficiently. And I'm going to have a couple of things indoor, which is new for me.
Nice.
So I'm doing the same. A couple of years ago, a friend gave me this pot, and it had a plant of amaranth on it. So amaranth is this it's a purple plant, is a grain, and you're supposed to eat the grain and stuff and so on. And I just had one pot. So last year I then got the seeds from it. Last year I planted the seeds and got a lot more pots. So this year I've got actually a whole bunch of the seeds, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to go to my garden, create a big patch, and I'm going to plant them. Now, I don't know whether I can plant them directly or whether I need to seed them first. I'm going to do a mixture of both to create actually a kind of few square meter by kind of maybe 10 square meter or 20 square meter sort of space of amaranths in that way, and see how that goes. So doing exactly what this is, growing along, and it's beautiful. They're lovely purple plants. And so it's going to try and just see what happens along with that. I've no idea what it does, but the point about it is started from one pot. So I'm really quite excited.
But I think you both also made the point. You fail a lot with gardening, right? I'm about to try. I'm about to try with tomatoes. I don't really have the right spot for it, but I'm going to try anyway. But you learn and you fail. There's a lot. I tried to get all our avocado seeds to.
Can you wait a moment? You wait a moment.
I haven't succeeded in one.
No, it's just fact of life. You're going to fail because some things work better than others, and you keep trying. So there it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is chickpeas, and what I'm doing is whatever I eat, I just take a few of them. This is mung beans, and I plant it.
Nice.
So these are not seeds that you buy; they just came out of the packet, and I just want to see where they grow, and they grow. So whatever it is I'm eating, I'm just taking a bit of it, plant it, see if it grows, and like you say, a lot of it don't work, some of it works, and then I go from there.
But the important thing, you have better gut health if you put your fingers in the dirt. So it's ultimately good for you anyway. All right, Joe. Daniel, do you think that was for you? I like it as a custodian.
It's talking about the idea of using computers and technology to execute your will and your desires in the past. So you can codify what your desires are, and I think that's what I did a quick search there, and I found something that sort of said something about that. So basically, anyway. That was about agentic AI and having the computer do stuff that you want it to do after you're gone. But anyway, what's been distracting me, as has been for the months and months and months before this as well, is mostly trading. So I'm actually making I'm working on my $1 million profits for the year. I'm trying to do it on the basis of a small risk that's grown exponentially over time as it compounds. Part of it is it's a proof of concept because I know it can be done. It's not that I had to prove it to myself. I have a mentor who has shown me how it's done, and frustratingly shows me how it's done every month. And I know that I have just certain things about my personal discipline that I have to implement so that I can do that. But the great thing about what I do as a trader is that I don't, because as you trade, you don't have to do something all the time. So I get to watch lots and lots of TV to go along with it. So I'm watching, I'm catching up and following Shrinking, which I think everybody's kind of fond of.
Yeah.
And I've just watched a movie on Apple TV called Wolves, which is with George Clooney and what's the other handsome guy? His good friend.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure
Okay.
Clooney will appreciate that comment because I think he's normally referred to as the handsome one.
Oh yeah,
Brad
it's
Pitt,
Clooney
right.
and Brad Pitt. So I think it's one of those accepted paradigms that they're both very good. Nice, typical. It's typically what you would expect from a collaboration of the two. It's got male energy going on in it, and not too much machismo, which is quite nice about it as well. So there's a
They do that well, don't they?
yeah. If you can imagine, I think so. Wolves is actually a good example of something which is a relationship between two guys at a professional level, and it evolves into a kind of safe space thing. So it's a apt illustration of something we were talking about before, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do that well. So Joe, you got me onto Deadlock. I actually had seen it advertised. So where is it? It's not on Netflix. It's on HBO or somewhere.
Prime, yeah.
Prime, right. Okay, so and if you don't, and I encourage you not to subscribe to Prime, because but anyway, I had seen it advertised, and it's a small Tasmanian community with some murders going on, and it is absolutely fantastic. That there's one character that annoys the crap out of me, and that's the detective from the Northern Territories. It's a little bit over the top for me, but everybody else, because I grew up in a large country area, and the richness of the characters that are all through this town, and it's not just their personalities, it's how they dress, their body shapes, the intergenerational sort of stuff. I mean, the lady that gets invited to do the Aboriginal lady that gets invited to do the ritual, and she just stands there and abuses everyone. You're not welcome.
Yeah.
And then the next episode she gets invited to do it again, and it was just like so that's a tradition that has I think it's brilliant, but I have been out of the country that what's it called? It's just gone blank in my head. My Australian friends will. I think I'm terrible.
It's the acknowledgement of the original owners of the land and that stuff, right?
But there's a specific term. But anyway, she just stands up and abuses. Well, I'm not welcoming you. None of you are welcome. So it's really, really, really funny. It's dark humor. And thank you for welcome. Steve's got it. Welcome to country. So that's something that sort of really came up since I left in '95. And I think it's a beautiful thing. So, but that's hilarious. it's just so good. And it's, as far as distracting my mind from this moment in time, perfect.
Yeah. The other show that I caught up with, and actually it's for me, it's part of this wave of shows that I talk about that I think talk about female perspectives quite a bit as well, is Scarpetta. So Scarpetta is doing pretty well. Nicole Kidman's in that, and that's
I find it a little bit too much.
I mean, like for me, Deadlock is something you can not really have to watch very hard, and you can kind of get the entertainment, you can smile. But Scarpetta, if you just stop watching for just a minute, you've lost the plot, and you have to get back in again. So it's high cognitive requirement to follow, but great production value. And what I thought was interesting about it for me, maybe a little too obvious sometimes. It was like the Benetton ads, back in the day when they tried to be so diverse, right? It was hitting you on the head. But it covers some issues which are female centric, which I think it was good the way they became plot points and it was used that way. So I think women will enjoy watching Scarpetta for those reasons, because you have flawed characters facing a patriarchal environment because of the flashback. It's set in the 90s and the present as well. And so it gets to jump back and forth, and you can see some comparisons.
Okay, that's the one with Jamie Lee Curtis in it, right? As the sister.
Yeah, and yeah.
Yeah.
And Jamie Lee
Yeah.
Curtis is as usual nowadays is doing just fantastic stuff.
Oh, she's brilliant. I love her. Honest woman. All right, we will see you all. No, so we're not here next week because it's Easter, right? Is that
It's
right?
Good Friday.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of Catholics in the mix, so we better honor that. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and we've got Andy Laparta joining us, and he's all about asking for help and using and building community and all that sort of stuff. So I think we can expand on a lot of the things that Nick brought today, and just big shout out to Nick. He's terrific, and really clever models, that he sort of developed, but he's used himself as the model, which I think is always amazing. But thanks, guys. Always good to chat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Have a good weekend.
We've managed the week, and let's see what happens next week.
And we always forget to do this at the start of the show. We should always do that earlier in the show. But hey, listen, if you like the show, if you found the show, you think it's interesting, please make sure you like, subscribe, recommend, tell your friends, break into your friend's computer. Get your agentic AI to go out there and hack other people.
To go along and get an email out there with the Trojan that will go along and subscribe everybody to the shit show.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Take care. Bye.